When we think about Parkinson's disease, our minds usually go straight to the brain. But what if one of its biggest collaborators, its hidden partner, was actually a condition that attacks the body's muscles? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on that very connection, one that really changes the game for strength, function, and just everyday life for people with Parkinson's. So, that leads us to this question right here. What is this hidden condition? A major study found that a staggering 1 in 3 people with Parkinson's was also dealing with something else, something that quietly but seriously drains the body's strength. Let's dig in and find out exactly what it is. Okay, so first things first, to really get a handle on this connection, we need to be super clear on the two conditions at play here. We're going to break them down one by one before we see how they get so tangled up together. And here it is. The hidden partner is a condition called sarcopenia. Now, put simply, it's the loss of muscle mass and function that happens as we get older. But I love this analogy here. If you think of osteoporosis as the weakening of your bones, sarcopenia is pretty much the exact same thing, but for your muscles. It's a really powerful way to picture it, right? And this really lays out the difference perfectly. On one side, you've got Parkinson's. That's a neurological issue starting in the brain that impacts movement. And on the other, you have sarcopenia, a muscle issue that affects your raw strength and physical ability. They really do sound like two totally separate problems. But as we're about to see, their stories are much more connected than you'd think. So, how in the world do we know they're so connected? Well, it all circles back to this really fascinating investigation that came out of Tokyo. A team of researchers there decided to find out just how strong this link really is. The study zeroed in on a very specific group, 97 patients with Parkinson's who were still able to walk. And that's actually a really key detail. It tells us the researchers were looking at people in the mild to moderate stages of the disease, not just those with the most severe symptoms. So to figure all this out, they measured a whole bunch of things. Some of it was really practical, like muscle strength in a hand grip or how easily someone could stand up from a chair. But they also looked at less visible factors, things like cognitive function and even swallowing ability, which is a huge indicator of muscle control. Every single measurement gave them another piece of this puzzle. All right, so they collected all this data, and what they found was, well, pretty startling. This is where the story gets really good, because the connection between Parkinson's and sarcopenia suddenly snaps into focus. Just look at these numbers. In the general population, sarcopenia hits maybe 14% of people. But in the group of Parkinson's patients they studied, that number skyrockets to 33%. That is 1 out of every 3 people. We're talking more than double the normal rate. This right here is the smoking gun. It's a massive signal that these two conditions are absolutely connected. So the big question is, who was most at risk? Well, when they dug into the data, some really clear patterns started to pop out. The group that also had sarcopenia was, on average, older, and they were much more likely to be female. They also had more trouble with swallowing and were dealing with more severe motor symptoms overall. Okay, so you see all these more severe symptoms, and you'd naturally think, well, of course, having sarcopenia on top of Parkinson's would mean a lower quality of life. It seems like a no-brainer, right? Well, the answer wasn't quite what they expected. Yeah, pretty surprising. The study actually found no direct, significant link. The researchers have a theory, though. They think the daily challenges of Parkinson's itself, things like tremors or brain fog, had such a huge impact on well-being that the extra effective muscle loss just didn't really show up as a separate thing in the quality of life scores. So, if it's not showing up in the quality of life scores, what are the biggest red flags to watch out for? The researchers crunched all their numbers to find the absolute strongest predictors, the key clues that pointed to a person developing sarcopenia right alongside their Parkinson's. And here they are. Out of everything they measured, 3 factors stood head and shoulders above the rest. Number 1, being female, which might be due to having a lower baseline muscle mass to begin with. Number 2, having cognitive impairment, which can impact things like nutrition and staying active. And number 3, swallowing issues, which is a really direct sign of muscle dysfunction. These were the biggest clues of all. So that brings us to the most important part of this whole story. So what? What does this all mean for people who are living with Parkinson's every day and for the people who care for them? What's the real takeaway here? The researchers' conclusion is incredibly direct and, honestly, powerful. What they're saying is that doctors and clinicians need to be actively looking for sarcopenia. They need to be assessing muscle strength, especially in Parkinson's patients who had any of those three big risk factors we just talked about. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. This research is basically telling us that caring for Parkinson's shouldn't just be about the brain. It has to be about the body's physical foundation, too. So, if we start to routinely screen for muscle loss, could we fundamentally change the future of care for everyone living with Parkinson's?